I do feel like there have been good metas and bad metas in Pocket, just as any game. There have been good metas and bad metas, and I think that's going to vary person by person, just depending on what you like to play, right? Like, for whatever instance, I really enjoyed the extra dimensional crisis meta. I just thought it was quite fun. I liked Buzzwole, I liked that combo, but I thought there were a lot of other cool decks that you could build there. And certain metas I haven't liked as much. For instance, the meta we're in right now, I think is fine, but I think is really fast. In fact, we've been in a really fast meta for a while, and I do wonder, can Pocket ever really slow down with some of the cards they have released? I do think there are some ways they could, and then part of me thinks it's just going to be things that attack for 1 or 2 energy forever outside of a few mainstay staples like Giratina EX. But let's get into it, everybody. Jake, your resident content cowboy here. Yeehaw. I do feel like the game has been getting faster and faster since its release. Obviously, when we had Genetic Apex, things were quite slow. Things like Mewtwo did very well, even when we were setting up things like Gardevoir pre-rare candy, right? We were able to set up walls. It was harder for our opponents to get to us. Like, the fastest thing out there was Pikachu that was able to attack for 2 energy, it felt like. But a lot of things were quite slow. Like, even Starmie was like blazingly fast back then. And of course, attacking for 2 energy, pretty good. It had that free retreat cost, right? And as we continued going, we had some quite slow metas. We had metas with, Druddigon in the active spot and powering up a Gyarados. We even had times where Manaphy felt like it was pretty solid, right? Because you were able to power up 2 water Pokemon with that 1 energy. But now the game has just gotten quicker and quicker and quicker, and there are a few reasons why, and I'm sure that they are jumping to the top of your mind as well. One of them, of course, being rare candy. Given that stage 2 Pokemon no longer need to hang out in that stage 1 at all, a really powerful stage 2, especially one that can attack for very little energy. I'm looking at something like Stoke Char, 1 energy to power itself, then it can attack next turn for its additional energy, or Soul Galeo, able to attack for 2 energy and move up to the active spot. Like, multiple reasons that cards are moving fast. And now, not only do we have Pokemon that can attack quickly and they can evolve quickly if they're stage 2 due to rare candy, we also have Pokemon that are drawing through your deck really fast. And I don't know about you, but I feel like when I'm playing a deck that doesn't draw at all, it is brutal against all of these decks that draw. And it's like every deck that is doing well right now is extremely fast and draws extremely fast. And it's really tough for slower decks to keep up. And that might just be the way that the game continues to go. There may be no fixing that. I mean, let's talk about the previous meta and this meta. So the previous meta was dominated completely by Sylveon EX, a insanely powerful card. It can attack for 2 energy, but that wasn't its biggest selling point, right? The biggest selling point for Sylveon EX, of course, was that you could draw your cards extremely fast. You essentially had another Professor's Research in your deck in the form of Sylveon EX. If you have 2 Sylveon EXs and 2 Professors, you've gone through your entire deck, basically. In just a couple turns. It's crazy fast. And then you are using that advantage, all of those additional cards, to set up any evolution that you need, get your entire team set up, play any supports that you need to play. It was really hard for other decks to keep up with something like this, especially decks that needed to evolve. Obviously, if you're looking to rare candy into your Stoke Charizard, that is so much better when you have rare candy and your Stoke Charizard. And a great way to do that is to just blaze through your deck as quickly as possible. Then we move into this meta. We have 3 cards that are very similar to Sylveon in a lot of ways. We have the legendary beasts, and they are able to draw an additional card every single turn just being in that active spot. You are going twice as fast through your deck simply having a basic EX in the active spot. I said EX in the active spot. And those EX, I try to say EX again. Those EX are able to attack for 2 energy. So these cards all continue this trend of crazy fast and now drawing through your deck in an incredibly fast way. That way you're seeing the same kinds of things that work really well when you draw through your deck, like rare candy into fill in the blank. Greninja is a huge culprit of this. All of these decks work extremely well because it's not too hard to get all of the cards you need, and the cards that you want to attack with are attacking for very little energy. And as we look forward towards new sets coming out, like the Mega set that's on the horizon, we know Mega Altaria is attacking for a single energy. Like, I'm very interested to see what happens as we continue to move forward, because it does look like it's really tough for cards that require multiple energy and multiple turns to get online to keep up with these speedy decks, especially ones that draw. If you're slow and you don't draw, you're the worst. But it feels like that, right? Even when we look to our most recent set and you look to something like Ho-Oh, Ho-Oh definitely is not terrible, but it is still a little slow. Just that 3 energy feels a little too slow. Then you look at something like Lugia and it feels like almost unplayable, right? It just requires so much to get this card online. Even though it is a basic, it has all of these weird energy requirements, and there are a couple of things that can change this, right? There are a couple of things that can change the way the meta looks, and I do think they will eventually be coming to Pocket, and I'm very curious to see what happens when they do. Okay, so first would be something that is shutting down abilities, right? If you shut down the ability of Entei, if you shut down the ability of Sylveon, all of a sudden these cards would lose so much value. It would kind of be like an Oricorio level meta shifting. If you could shut down all of these abilities, I cannot imagine how different some of these situations would be. And now the question is, how are they going to do that? Are we going to do that with a specific Pokemon like Oricorio that literally says EX Pokemon, you can't do much to me, buddy? Or are we going to go in a different direction and possibly have things like stadiums come into play? And some of these stadiums have different effects that could make something like the legendary Pulse on Suicune ineffective, and it just doesn't work. Now all of a sudden your Suicune deck is a huge liability. Sure, it's great to have you in the active spot, but if your opponent can play this card that shuts down one of your biggest assets, all of a sudden this becomes a very like okay basic EX Pokemon. You're still attacking for decent damage for only a couple energy, but you're losing all of that card draw. Of course, Sylveon, it is an ability as well. You would lose all its card draw. Now the question is, would this shut down Pokemon with abilities in the active spot? Would it shut down all abilities across the board? Are they going to add something like this? I don't know, but I do think when you look at how powerful all of these abilities are, at some point we're going to need something to slow it down a little bit. Otherwise, it's just going to be faster and faster and faster. We'll have an EX, it'll be EX Rampardos, because Rampardos is just unbelievably broken. EX Rampardos, when it comes into play, you draw 4 cards, it attacks for negative energy, like it takes energy from like your opponent or something like that, and it attacks with that. Like, I don't know how we're gonna slow it down if you are not slowing down some of these Pokemon abilities, and I do think a way to do that is either with a singular Pokemon or maybe more likely with something like a stadium, like entire field effect card. I do wonder though, when are they going to make a change like this? Will they make a change like this? And I wonder from you, like, what do you think of this meta? Do you like a meta that's extremely fast? Do you feel like the game is getting more or less strategic as we are going? I do feel like every meta has its ups and downs. There are some that feel like, for me in particular in this one, I just feel like it's so samey all the time. Even though there are multiple meta decks that actually work pretty well, I do feel like I'm running into the same situation a lot, and you are seeing sort of the dominoes start to fall as a match is going on, right? If it's Suicune active, Giratina bench, they hit a Froakie early, you think, boy, this is really hard to come back from. Like, already, without knowing what they're going to draw, without knowing how the rest of the game is going to go, that's a really hard situation to come back from, and it happens right at the start of a match. It can be pretty rough. And again, there are a lot of decks that actually play kind of well in this meta, but I do think, for me, running into the same strategy over and over again and almost seeing the writing on the wall really early in a match hasn't been the most fulfilling way to play Pocket. I haven't liked this meta as much as some of the others. I don't know. I don't know what it is. I do feel like the card draw, though, for a lot of these decks has forced things to just be so unbelievably quick. And if you don't have any way to disrupt them, like if you don't get your red card or your Mars, or you don't get your draw on the other side, it just feels like you already know the outcome really before much has happened, which I don't love. So I do hope we see some type of change. And I guess the question really is, does Pocket want to slow down? Does it want to be more in depth? Does it want to shut down all of these abilities it has created? They've actually done a really interesting job of sort of switching up the metas as we've gone, right? You had this slow, deliberate meta, and then Pokemon would retreat, and you can't get to them. Sabrina couldn't get to them, but then they introduced Cyrus, and then basics are dominating, and then they introduce rare candy. Like, there have been switches throughout the history of this game, and it's crazy to think, but throughout the year that this game has been out, there have been some big meta swings, and I do think it's about time that we see something change the quickness, the draw, something so that the game slows down a little bit. Sadly, I do think, however that turns out, it will somehow make Giratina and Darkrai even better. But it is what it is. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I love you. I'll see y'all next time. I would assume we have a trailer coming for the new set soon. I honestly thought it was coming this morning as I'm recording this video. But here we are. Love you guys. We did it.